John Talty, CBS Sports, joins us now. John has been very, very busy. Last summer you were promoting a book and trying to finish that up, which I would think you probably would prefer to everything you've had to do right now, which is write about presidential commissions and the House settlement. What has been your view of this now that it's finally been approved and that now college leaders can get their hands around trying to figure out whatever it really means, which I think it's pretty clear they don't really know yet.
Well, I was really excited when that news broke. I think like 8-something p.m. on a Friday night. That was a lot of fun, especially for something I've been waiting for so long to finally happen. But I think that, one, just on a personal level, I'm very excited to never have to write if the House settlement gets approved. So that's great that we know that it's happening. And I think now, I remember when it finally broke, I got multiple texts from people, in the college sports world, like, all right, let's get to work. So I think the good thing is that now we're going to see, how this actually works in reality. And, people like me and, others in our industry who I respect have written a lot about hypothetical, theoretical things, if this happens, what will happen? Well, we're about to actually find out. We're about to get these kind of stress tests when it comes to the NIL stuff. That's a big part of, I think, the questions around how this is going to work. Well, we're going to have deals that get sent through this clearinghouse, and they're going to either be approved or rejected, and then we'll see what happens from there. But I think that's the thing that's going to be, really interesting, exciting, whatever you want to call it, that we'll finally have some real data to work with and not just people like me theorizing as to what it could be.
John, I know you passed along the quote from Brett Yormark on the affiliation agreements. What are your thoughts on those overall? Do you see any hiccups? And for a Brett Yormark or any other leaders maybe that you've heard from, talk to, kind of what stands out in the midst of all the words flying around here of the past couple of days?
Yeah, affiliation agreements, from everyone I've talked to, they believe they're critical. You got to have everyone on board with what they're saying they're going to do. Greg Sankey told an anecdote that, his recent, meetings that, whether it was presidents, ADs, football coaches, whenever he was in those meetings, he kind of brought up the same thing. Like, basically, do you want to live in an unregulated world or do you want rules? And he said time and time again, people said they wanted rules, they wanted structure. Well, that's what you want. Then put your money where your mouth is and sign up and abide by what the rules of this thing are going to be. And I think what you've seen, and I think, Kansas AD has maybe been the most outspoken in recent days, but you're seeing this kind of dichotomy of, ADs, commissioners, other people involved in kind of at ground level at this building this new world of what the House settlement is going to be like, trying to be optimistic about it, trying to believe that it's going to create real solutions. And then you have these other people, football coaches, personnel people, whether they're talking anonymously or, just behind the scenes, the people like me and others that are just so deeply skeptical that any of this stuff's going to work. And so you're seeing some frustration, I think, on both sides, whether it be people who live in this world every day who think that some of this stuff is Pollyannish and has no hope of being successful. And then the people who put a lot of hours and time into trying to build this, being upset that, this thing hasn't even started yet. And you guys are already saying it's not going to work. Like, at least give it a shot. At least say that you're going to do what you're going to do. So there's just a lot of things that are kind of conflicting right now. And we'll see how that stuff ultimately plays out, moving forward. But I think that one of the most interesting things within that is people are already trying to come up with ways around what this House settlement is trying to accomplish. And if that's the mentality that people have, then, it's hard to be super optimistic about it actually succeeding the way people want it to.
But isn't that just college sports? Like, that's just that's good old college. Like, who's not trying to still cheat and find their advantage, man? Like, we commented the same thing. I was like, this thing is not even dried yet, and there's already teams coming up with ways to circumvent it. It's crazy.
It's a great meditation sport. It's just yourself. You get out here, feeling the rhythm, feeling the rhyme. It's a good time.
Gives me the opportunity to hang out with the fellas for about 5 hours. And I get some solitude, relaxation, and a great time.
There's nothing I love more in life that doesn't have a heartbeat than golf.
I like the frustration involved with trying to find that right elusive swing. Or I just like to have a couple cocktails with some friends and maybe some cigars.
Golf is therapy to me. Malban Golf.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's how it's always been, like, to your point. Yeah. And people love to use the NCAA as a scapegoat. And I get it. There have been a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to defend the NCAA here. But they were carrying out and trying to enforce the rules that its members decided, which are all the individual schools. And what you heard time and time again in the NCAA model was, we want these rules enforced for them, not for us. And whenever the NCAA turned its sights on a school, that's when you saw the belly aching, the crying, the threats of lawsuits, sometimes even suing. And so that can't be how this world works if it's going to be successful. And that's what, to circle back, what those affiliation agreements are trying to prevent, that when the time comes that we found out that you did something you shouldn't, you can't just sue us. Like, these are the rules you have to abide by. And if you're not willing to, there are going to be real ramifications of that. And so that's, I think they're trying to avoid the world that the NCAA was in, where its enforcement team was essentially unable to do anything, basically out of fear of getting sued or whatever it might be. That can't be how this one works.
What do you think of the obstacles ahead of the new enforcement arm? First of all, they have to make the rule. Like, they have this as the skeleton of the rules, but they haven't really made specific rules for enforcement yet. That's coming based on, I guess, Brett Yormark's quote. We're going to have rules. We're going to give them rules. Those will be forced and they'll be punitive, enforced, and the punishments will be punitive. What are the challenges for them to actually set up those rules, given everything we just talked about, of people already trying to figure out, like, how do I be a bagman again?
Yeah. The rise of the bagman. What a time. Well, I think it's the most basic level is, like, you got to build a staff, right? I mean, they're really up against a kind of the rush here. They have to hire a lot of people in a short time frame. And I think part of it too is that they probably have to hire people outside of college sports. So that creates some kind of initial hurdles right there. The rules, I think, is a big part of it. Is, what is this set up? I think with the NCAA, not only were the enforcement of rules really challenging, but just how it dragged out so long. We're still dealing with stuff that happened years ago that still hasn't all the way gone through the process. I know they want to be a lot more timely with that. They want to be more transparent and allow all the kind of key parties a better chance to defend themselves. But also, once that kind of enforcement penalty is doled out, then they have to accept it and move on. So I think that the big thing is just kind of, we're all still in that theoretical world right now, is, what is this new CEO, Brian Seeley, going to do? Well, we don't know yet. But I think once we have that data, it'll be easier to kind of understand, all right, if you do X, you're going to get hit with Y. Because I think in time, the NCAA, you kind of knew, there was even a penalty matrix of, well, if you do X, Y, Z, you're going to be hit with this. That's not how it's set up to this point. And from my understanding, from talking to people involved with this process, they don't really want to get too boxed into a very strict set of rules. I think they want there to be more, flexibility, more, kind of judgment of of Brian Seeley and other parts of his team. So there's going to be some hiccups along the way. And I think, again, the big one will be, what's the first time that a NIL deal gets rejected? What happens? What does that person do? And, if they're still upset after going through the arbitration process, what does everybody do? Do they kind of fight, or do they kind of put their guns down and accept the decision? That's going to be a really telling moment, I think, for how this new system is going to work.
John, in line with that, I mean, I think the biggest questions we don't have answers to, we're going to find out just naturally as this goes along. But you mentioned something there at the beginning, is of, like, if this doesn't work out, for all the doom and gloomers and the Debbie Downers, and I don't want to be that, but what if this doesn't work out? Like, what is on the other side of that? Do you have any clue of what that would look like, or is everybody just too scared to even start thinking about what that would look like if this all were to be on a house of cards, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of things that are still need to be figured out. You have all these different people who believe that, this next thing has to happen. You have people who believe that whether it's collective bargaining or employment or unionization, that will fix some of these other issues. We've, of course, seen that even today, the commissioners are renewing the need for congressional help to fix some of their problems. So I think that partly, if it doesn't work, you'll see a renewed push for other areas where they feel like they might get the solution that they're not getting with the House settlement. But I think ultimately, the broader thing is, if it doesn't work, then, do we see down the line a breaking away from the NCAA system and having to basically create a whole new world if this current one can't work with the restrictions that they're under. There's a lot of people who believe that that's possible. There's been talk about, breakaway for years now. And I think there's many people who don't want that to happen. And even, Greg Sankey, SEC meetings recently was talking about how, people complain to him about like, why are we still in the NCAA? But, they're still accepting bids to the College World Series and the NCAA tournament. And so, people love to get mad at the NCAA, but they still like to participate in its events, which is a big part of what they do. And so, if you leave, then you're going to leave those events and someone has to figure out how those happen. And it's all kinds of other different issues. But I think that's maybe the doomsday option, is that if this doesn't work, if it doesn't provide some level of stability, given all the issues that they've had for the last 4 years, then maybe a more extreme measure is going to have to happen down the line.
What did you take of Greg Sankey's very non-answer on his golf outing with Pete Bavacqua and Donald Trump over the weekend?
I took it that he probably wasn't thrilled that information is out there. And
that he went?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I love the work that Ross Dellinger does. It was a great scoop. I'm sure, Greg might not have minded if that one was kept under wraps, just, for a million reasons. But I think it was interesting, the timing of it, that he did that yesterday ahead of this early call, but also, there's been, and I've written a lot about it, but all the presidential commission stuff, we've reported at CBS Sports that, Greg Sankey and the SEC were not in favor of that presidential commission. And, we're kind of pushing their constituents to stay away from that for a variety of different reasons. So maybe partly, Greg kind of, maneuvering around that and just going direct to President Trump to see if he might be able to help him in a couple different areas. I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I believe you and Brandon Marcello got called out by Ted Cruz, right?
We did indeed. Yeah, that's another interesting day.
John, when it comes to the government part of this, is there any optimism from anyone that they can actually get something done, or is that still in the let's continue talking phase, which has been committee hearing after committee hearing and this over the last 4 years, really?
Yeah, I mean, I've been skeptical from the very beginning. Maybe, I'm kind of a political nerd, so I keep a pretty close eye on things. And, doesn't seem like a lot of things get done there, right? So I thought it was always going to be a little tricky for college athletics to get its solution from that group of people, given how divisive things are right now. But, you hear different things, right? Like I talked to some ADs who go up there and they have these kind of, basically they bring up a bunch of schools and, athletes, ADs, coaches, and they bring them around the Capitol Hill, and you meet with congressmen and senators and all that. And talked to a couple of them who have been up there, and they say they kind of come back a little depressed of like, a lot of these people just don't actually get the issues. But college sports has invested millions of dollars in a federal solution. They've spent a lot of money on lobbying dollars. They've made a lot of trips over the last 3-4 years. The commissioners especially have been up there a lot. So I think from that level, there's some level of optimism. Even Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti said today that he thinks the House settlement helps their pitch that Congress sees that college sports actually is willing to change. They are willing to make decisive, bold actions to try to fix some of the big issues. But it's tough. It's tough to get anything done there. And I think, right now you've seen a lot of people who do want to find solutions, Ted Cruz being one of them. There's, multiple different senators. Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut's been one who's been involved in bills, but they just haven't even gotten a bill to the floor yet. And so even we know just getting a bill to the floor is a Herculean effort, but that hasn't even happened yet, let alone a bill actually getting passed through both chambers of Congress. So it still feels really far off to me, but I don't think they're giving up on that effort. And I think you'll see, more and more push of trying to find some way to codify the settlement. And also, I know for Sankey, a big thing is trying to get a federal law so it's not each state being able to do its own thing and having maybe one set of rules for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the wheels of government turn very slow, even things that feel obvious, like, hey, there shouldn't be arsenic in the drinking water. And they're like, but how much? And you're like, well, none. And like, but couldn't there be some? What? And you're like, well, no, like, let's not do that. But it still slows down. Do you think that the House settlement paves the way for the greater separation of the P4 and everybody else. And if you want to be a P4 into a P5, is there a mechanism for you to say, look, we're Boise State, we're Fresno State, we're one of these teams, we're going to put up the capital. We'll do it. You let us find the money. You just make sure that we have a seat at the table.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that is we've seen SMU basically do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And work to great success of, giving up a lot of money to join the ACC. We'll fund it ourselves. We've got the money. We'll figure out a way to do it. And they make the playoff in the first year. That's the dream, right? And I think, like you mentioned, whether it's, Boise State, you got multiple schools, I think, in the American, like Tulane, South Florida, Memphis, who are willing to invest, I think, at a pretty high level. But yeah, I think that's part of it. It's I think maybe better than any other previous period, I think, in college sports is a lot of people want to pretend like there's something or feel like they're in the big kid club. Well, now you're able to kind of show it in a very clear, decisive way. Are you spending or are you not? Are you opting in or are you not? And I do think the divide will grow even greater between the haves and the have-nots. That's not new. I think it's been happening for a while, but being able to spend, say, $13 to $16 million just on rev share on your football team compared to some schools that can maybe only pay $1 to $2 million, if that, it's a massive difference, especially as that adds up over time as you add different players who want to make money versus going to schools where you can't. That's a huge difference. So that's going to, I think, really create an even bigger divide between, kind of the level of the big dogs and, the smaller schools. So I think we'll still see some upsets. There'll still be some, great players at the smaller level. I think a lot of good teams at that level, but it's going to be harder for them to compete if they're not willing to spend. And, ultimately, again, if we get back to what we were saying earlier, if one day there's a breakaway, I do think the spending will be part of the dividing line. Are you willing to spend big to be with us, or you're not able to afford it? Then maybe you need to be at the lower level, the lesser level.
Is this a welcome respite for them to stop arguing about the playoff for a week and then go back to it?
I'm already working on other stories around the playoffs, so I don't know. Not a break for me, at least.
But
yeah, it'd be nice to have that. I think we've entered peak off-season mode, so it's talking a lot about the playoff. We're getting the lists are coming out right now, so that's kind of where we're at. But I don't know what the current fan interest is in that stuff. I do think that the automatic qualifier stuff is pretty unpopular with fans to this point. I don't think that's going away, but there's a big meeting June 18th in Asheville, North Carolina, where all the commissioners will meet again to talk through the different issues. And I think there's been some surprise over the last couple of weeks with all these different conference meetings, what's come out of them. Certainly the SEC probably being the number one. So I expect it to be a pretty robust discussion around, seeding, selection committee stuff, and then, the future format of it. But yeah, there's been so much talk about your eyes glaze over after a certain point.
Do you think the Big Ten would be content to lose their whole proposal if the SEC just played that 9th game? Would they be all right with that?
I don't know. I know that some of that stuff's come out. I'm still skeptical that that's all it would take. I think that they believe that there's a lot of value in going to automatic qualifiers for a number of reasons. And so I think what might be more likely is that they say, let's just keep the current format. They've won the last 2 national championships. Last year they put in 4 teams. Like, it's worked pretty well for them. So I think that they, at this point, my read on it is that they would rather keep where things are right now rather than expanding to 16 if the model is going to be 5-11, even if that comes with the SEC moving to 9 games. Now, that might be what ends up happening anyway, but as it stands right now, that's not the Big Ten preference. I think that they either keep it as it is or, let's go to that 4-4-2-2, model that at the time the SEC was very, very into, though it has since cooled since their spring meetings.
Hey, their coaches didn't like it.
Not at all.
Yeah. No, I don't think they want to walk into that room with 16 coaches that all hate it. I think that's a big, big deal. I don't want to have to hear Kirby Smart call. If I'm Greg Sankey, I don't need Kirby Smart calling me saying this is dumb, this is dumb, this is dumb over and over again, because he would.
Yeah, and I think for coaches, it goes against, for a lot of them, their ethos of like being competitive and playing your way in. Now, we have seen, I think, some other coaches who do like it, but I think by and large, especially the SEC coaches, like, talking to multiple different people, both, on the record and also kind of behind the scenes, like, they do not like going to non-conference games. They don't think there's value in doing so right now. And they don't like AQs because they think that maybe it's just the aura of the SEC and maybe overconfidence, but they think they can put more than 4 teams in, especially if it expands to 16. So, they don't want to have the automatic. They want to put as many teams as they can in, and they want to be judged. They want to be judged as to, what they're doing on the field, and not simply we're getting 4 in automatically and then that's it. So by and large, the Kirby Smarts of the world, Lane Kiffins, do not like it. Lane Kiffin put the 16 best in. I don't think we're moving away from automatic bids altogether, but I think a lot of us probably would. Yeah, take the 16 best and let it play out, and I think that would be pretty good.
John Talty, CBS Sports. John, good luck for the rest of the summer and all the different things you have to write and whatever may come up out of the woodwork that you have not anticipated, which is most of college athletics right now. So enjoy.
Appreciate it. Good talking to you guys.
John Talty with us here from CBS Sports and 24/7.